Welcome to the Independent Schools podcast with me, Juliet Corbett. I'm absolutely passionate about adapting best practice and research from the business sector to address the real-world challenges being faced by schools. In this podcast, leaders of independent schools will learn actionable tips and strategies to strengthen their school's income streams, be it through fees, fundraising, or commercial ventures. So thanks for joining me today, and let's jump straight in. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. So this week we're going to be focusing on the income which independent schools can generate by both hiring out their facilities and by the retail activities that they may also undertake. So I'm grouping these together under the term of commercial income. So I'm delighted to be joined to talk about this week by Andrew Cook. Andrew's the Chief Development and Commercial Officer at Repton School, which is a co-educational independent boarding school for pupils aged 13 to 18. It's situated in the heart of the Derbyshire countryside here in the UK, and it's close by to its prep school, Foremark Hall. Repton's history stretches back more than 450 years to its founding in 1557. Prior to starting with Repton, Andrew was the Director of Fundraising and Communications at Walking with the Wounded for 7 years. And throughout his career, he's focused on strategic corporate development, business management, marketing and communications, all with a focus on helping organisations to grow their revenue, audience and profile. Andrew oversees Repton Enterprises, which have various commercial activities, including conferences, weddings, residential courses, sports activities and retail activities. During our conversation today, one of the things we note is the critical importance of getting everybody internally on board with these sorts of commercial activities. And he talks about Repton Enterprises' 4 core principles which help them to ensure that this buy-in happens around clarity, ownership, respect and education. Really excited that we also cover reasons for optimism around the commercial income that independent schools can generate as we come out of the COVID-19 crisis. And a real theme that runs through our conversation is the balancing of independent schools being considered obviously as centres of academic excellence as a school, but also as a business, and the critical importance of business acumen and having commercially minded people on the senior leadership team, especially at this point of crisis, and the importance of having that strong business model to rely on as a school. So let's dive into the conversation that I had with Andrew around commercial income for independent schools. Okay, so thank you very much to Andrew Cook for joining us today for this podcast episode. Firstly, Andrew, do you want to tell us a little bit about the commercial activities that you oversee at Repton?
Yes, of course, and thanks very much for having me on your podcast. It's very exciting to join you. So at Repton, we historically we've focused very much on residential courses and our sports facilities. I think historically, enterprise income has been something that the school has had a dedicated team to deliver against, but it hasn't really been that integrated into the DNA of the school, which I think is probably similar to many schools within the sector. So I think that there's a number of assets that we have within Repton that I don't think had been utilised as extensively as they could have been. And so what we've done is we've identified 5 key income streams within Repton Enterprises across sport, conferences, day lets, residential and retail. And within the retail, we have our sports centre cafe, our merchandise, the Grubber, which is the school tuck shop, JCR, and also the school shop with uniform. And so they're the 5 key areas that we've looked at as an enterprise function.
I think quite a few of those would be common across other schools, but I know a lot of schools pick and choose the particular areas that are relevant to their school setting and the demand for their services and resources in their local area. So I was really interested to see that your job title, so you're Chief Development and Commercial Officer. So clearly that's, I can see that there's a common skill set between the fundraising, alumni relations, external relations role of development and the marketing and commercial elements within the enterprise activities. But what do you think was the thinking behind combining those 2 roles, and do you think it works well?
Well, I think the thinking behind it was really to centralise all of the commercial income that the school could generate, as well as the foundation and the alumni and the Old Reptonian Society, and really looking at what are the income streams for the school outside of fee income. And so it was really to centralize all of those under one roof, as it were, and then bringing in somebody actually not from a school background, but specifically from a commercial background with strategic corporate development, sales and marketing experience to really make use of the overlap within the marketing, the admissions, but also the international schools that we have, and the, as you say, the enterprise commercial income and the foundation. So looking at all of those different elements to the school outside of the classroom academia, if you will, and the school fee income to centralize all of that under one roof.
Absolutely. And I suppose behind that decision, there's a real acknowledgement that the school is a business, and while it's incredibly important that the educational side of things is at the front and centre of everything that happens within Repton, there's a key part of the business model which requires real business acumen and business thinking to keep it running and keep it profitable.
Absolutely. And actually it's interesting within Repton Enterprises, it's I think one of the most important aspects of the role is really to build that internal stakeholder engagement and to get everybody on board and understanding what you're doing and what the role is. And clearly in the current market and in the conditions that we're all operating within, for everybody to have a genuine understanding of the necessity of it, not only to have an enterprise function, but to have a successfully commercially operated one. All schools at the moment are operating under very difficult conditions, and we only have to look at business rates or increase in annual costs through the TPS or potential VAT on school fees that might come in the future, that we all have to be very, very acutely aware of the impact on schools financially and the need to generate as much income through the assets of the school as possible. Only from my point of view, one of the things that we put together very early on was looking at something that we called our core principles. And the core aspect of that stood for clarity, where we'll always communicate in a transparent and timely fashion with stakeholders, ownership in terms of being accountable for operating in a professional, ethical and courteous manner. And then the last two, which are absolutely crucial, is respect. And that's ensuring that we always promote the school's assets in partnership with colleagues that own that asset, whether it's a classroom, whether it's a hockey pitch, whether it's an art studio, a music room, that all of those individuals within the Repton community who are key stakeholders are involved in those decisions and understand how we're utilising their assets. And then finally, the education piece. I mean, clearly, first and foremost, we always put the integrity of the pupils' needs and Repton and Foremark Hall Prep School as of the schools first. That the pupils' needs, the academia, why they're there, is the core priority of the school, and we need to maintain the integrity of that.
Absolutely. And I know that tension, or that potential for tension at least, between the need for there to be a solid business model underpinning independent schools and the front and centre importance of the educational activities that are happening, and that can sometimes lead to a tension. And I've seen that within the higher education sector as well, that within a university setting, resentment from students around conferencing activities and so on can really eat away at an organisation's culture. And it's very important to see that these are really important elements. We have to find a way for them to mesh together. And I love the way that you've set out really clearly those founding principles, those fundamental principles. And especially, I think respect is a really critical part of that, and that it's an understanding of the way in which you're going to monetize, if you like, the school's facilities, but at the same time have full respect for the educational activities that are going on within the school every single day. So you started at Repton in September 2019. I'd be really interested to know about the types of questions that you asked when you first started to collect the information that you wanted at your fingertips, so to speak, in order to make decisions about what you wanted to continue with, the activities you might wanted to change slightly. What kind of things were front and centre of your mind in making those initial assessments of how the function was operating and the direction you wanted to take it in?
Well, it was doing a bit of an audit really on what were the assets that were available to us as an enterprise department. As I said earlier, who the stakeholders of those assets were, who were the owners of those assets, and also looking historically at business that we've done in the past, and looking more closely at creating various sort of matrices of profitability per income stream, per activity. What was the activity during the course of the year? When were there gaps? So really, so we could see which elements of business that we were operating were profitable. And it's almost like creating a traffic light system, red, amber, green of profitability, because our aim very much going forward is clearly to not only continue to look after our existing clients, but we need to grow the business over the next few years quite considerably. And in order to do that, we need to understand both where our opportunities are in terms of calendar of activity, but also crucially where our profitable business is and within which income streams.
Absolutely. And did you find you had different plans in each of those 5 key areas, or are they all fairly similar? It's just that the way that you're marketing and collecting that particular income stream is different.
I think each of the income streams have a very specific marketing plan behind them. I think the other key thing to remember with all of these is that the more conferences that we do, the more weddings that we have, the more people we have playing tennis or coming on study courses or whatever it might be, they all could be potential parents or pupils going forward. And so what's also crucial is to work closely with admissions in the process, to understand from their point of view as well how we can market the school collaboratively. So each of those income streams, as I say, has a very specific sort of tactical marketing plan sitting behind it, because each of them are their own mini business, if you will.
Yes.
We're going to market weddings differently to how we market English language courses aimed at students in Europe or the Far East, and they all need their very specific marketing plans and strategies behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think identifying the audiences, the messages and the channels that you're going to use for each of those marketing activities is the key to keeping it really focused. One of the other challenges that schools can have in assessing the profitability of each of those activities that they undertake is really getting a proper understanding of the staffing requirements for each of those, and the amount of time that, for example, the amount of time that a conference takes to service from the school's point of view versus the amount of time that a wedding might take can be quite different, even though on the surface they might feel like quite similar activities. How do you attempt to assess the amount of staff time that goes into running each of those activities in order to calculate effectively the profitability of that activity?
Yeah, and there's 2 ways to operate those types of events. You can either become a wedding planner yourself, or you're simply providing a facility for a third party to actually run, manage, and operate and deliver the event. And certainly, when it comes to sort of the weddings and the conferences side, whilst we have a degree of experience on the ground with those types of events and activities, we very much sort of sublet the space and the venues and the facilities to an external planner, if you will, who will actually sort of plan, organise, and deliver it in keeping with our terms and conditions, obviously, and the criteria of allowing our space to be let.
Absolutely. So obviously the big elephant in the room is COVID-19. I'm assuming that there's been a substantial change to the way that each of these 5 key areas is operating currently. I'd be really interested to know how you found that initial phase of crisis, and then more generally how you're looking at your plans going forwards and what your thinking is around adapting to the COVID-19 environment.
Well, from the beginning of the sort of, I guess it was the end of February, beginning of March, we reacted pretty quickly in terms of contacting all of our clients, customers, and shutting down the facilities. And so we didn't have any activity over Easter, and we've obviously cancelled all of our activity over the summer. As of today, on the 28th of May, we still have bookings in the diary for October half term and December. But as far as we're concerned, anything to the end of August thus far has been cancelled, and most of which has been rescheduled for 2021. But we acted pretty quickly and obviously followed the government guidelines. I also spoke to sort of peers within the sector to get a sense of what their thinking was, and I think it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that we were all operating in the same manner. And it's been for everybody, clearly it's been a very difficult time. I would have thought the vast majority of most schools' income comes over Easter and summer, clearly, with residential courses amongst others and weddings and such like. So clearly had a significant impact on schools' income, in addition to the reduction of school fees as well. So it's clearly been a very difficult time.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things we've been talking about on this podcast is the importance of maintaining relationships with external stakeholders of different types, so donors in particular from last week's episode. Interested to hear your reflections on maintaining relationships with your corporate partners, so the planners and so on that are using your school facilities. What sort of things have you done to maintain those relationships during the shutdown?
Well, we've been in comms with our suppliers across various events, be it our Leavers Ball or, as I say, residential courses, weddings, conferences, etc. And we've really just been in touch with them on a weekly basis with updates on what's happening and seeing how other activities that they're involved in are panning out, and working very closely with them to ensure that their business going forward, the deposits, for example, that have been taken for our events are carried forward to next year, and we're getting booking in their diary as soon as possible, and so we can start firming up business for them as soon as possible as well. So there's very much a collaborative approach in ensuring that we're mitigating as much of the financial risk as possible by staying loyal to suppliers and maintaining the similar cost base that we are this year to next year. We're not going to be increasing costs for anything. And so, and I think there's been a very collaborative spirit amongst all the suppliers and customers in terms of honouring existing activities and events.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's just a regular contact, and I think in these times, what's really, really crucial is just being transparent and honest.
Yeah, absolutely. That authenticity, this sense that no one can predict what's going to happen next, but we're all going to do our best by each other. And I think that develops trust between the different participants of the relationship, and it's that trust which is going to see us through, I think, and going to see repeat bookings in terms of the commercial activity, donations coming up again after the crisis in terms of the fundraising activity. And the more you can use this, not use this opportunity, but the more you embrace the authenticity and the empathy that's required during this crisis, the more you'll see people trust the brand of your school and you as an individual, and then stick with you in terms of when they're ready to start making bookings and so on going forwards.
I think the really important thing that we all need to keep in mind is use the word devastating to all of us in the last few months. There will be an end to it, and we will be fighting another day, as it were. And so you've got to look after people, and you've got to do right by people.
Absolutely.
And it's really important to respect those people that you work with, internally and externally, and to build those relationships. This is important to build the relationships now as much as it is in buoyant times.
Completely.
But
absolutely.
we will get through this, and there will be a need to organise events and activities and to utilise the school's assets again going forward.
Absolutely.
And so you need to have those relationships ready to go.
Absolutely. I've heard a lot of people say, when this is all over, we're going to have a big party, and referring back to following the First World War, we had the Roaring Twenties, and this idea that the bounce back could well be significant. I don't know, to be honest, whether it's going to be that sudden. I think it will be a slow return, but yeah, people are going to want to meet again. They're going to want to have parties, and those weddings, those anniversary parties, those social gatherings. Definitely. When people are ready to have them, they're going to want to have them in style, that they're able to do that again. Definitely. And do you think that there are certain elements of your income stream where, given certainly in the UK, what we're anticipating is that smaller groups will be able to mix again before the big large activities? So things like particular residential courses where I'm thinking about Easter next year, where you're thinking small classes sizes that are in keeping with the current schools regulations, social distancing and so on, that might come back sooner than your big corporate conference, 300 people in a room type activity. Are you thinking ahead that far? Well,
interestingly, we had an inquiry in the last week for English language courses in Easter 2021, and that's for 150 13 to 16-year-olds each week for 2 weeks. So we've had inquiries in the last 2 or 3 weeks from probably half a dozen new potential clients, So people are still wanting to talk about activity. They're still wanting to pencil in activity from Easter next year onwards. I've even had some inquiries for December. So people are still certainly out there looking at facilities and penciling in activity, so they are ready to go as soon as we're able to, which adds to the comment you made earlier about building those relationships and maintaining relationships. Cultivating relationships is a prerequisite, as far as I'm concerned, 12 months of the year, regardless of when your peak times of business are. So I've been really encouraged by the number of inquiries that we've been getting in the last few weeks.
That's fantastic. And I think that also echoes the advice to businesses out there is be ready for the upturn. There is a first mover advantage when the moment is right, being ready to take that first move and go to market with a particular foreign language residential course or a particular activity that you're wanting to sell to the general public. Those businesses who are running the activities that are using your facilities, the really clever ones are penciling in plans for next year, because it gives them something to talk about on their social media. It gives them something to get excited about. And then when the time is right, and they may not know when that time is going to be, but whenever it is, they will be ready. They'll have a venue, they'll have dates, they'll have a cost base and budget sorted, and then they'll be ready to go. And those businesses will have a first mover advantage as we come through this. So that doesn't surprise me too much. That's promising.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's really worth noting as well is, with the number of people, especially within the events hospitality industry, that have been furloughed, I think there's going to be a fairly long tail in terms of how businesses analyse how they were operating during lockdown and during this period of furlough for many staff. And I think ultimately there is a distinct possibility that many organisations might sit there thinking, well, actually, we don't need as many staff as we did before, or we thought we did. And therefore, I think there's going to be, as I say, a bit of a tail within the hospitality and events industry in terms of facilities, venues, knowing exactly what they are going to be able to offer. And actually, I think with schools, it's a far easier conversation to have internally. And so it puts schools, I think, in an advantageous position to talk to organisations, because the assets that they have are finite. The staffing requirements, they know what they are, they're very familiar with them. And I think it gives them a good opportunity over maybe some other bigger, more utilised venues, shall we say, for conferences and such like. I think schools can adapt and be more flexible and agile in their approach. And I think that puts them at a great advantage.
And absolutely, and running from that, one of the things that holds back consumer demand is a risk aversion, a sense they don't want to pay a deposit to an organisation that might not be there next Easter,
Absolutely.
next summer. And at least within the independent school sector, there is this sense that these institutions have been around for hundreds of years. Okay, I know schools are having difficulties. It's not an easy period of time. And we will probably be seeing, we have already seen mergers and schools ceasing to exist and so on. But in terms of the big names, if you've got a brand that people trust, I'm confident that is going to be there next summer. And so paying a deposit now actually is a relatively low risk activity, especially if you've got the appropriate refund and postponement terms and conditions and so on. And that sense of customer risk aversion, I think independent schools have an advantage over many other venue providers at this point, because they have the brand and people can trust that they will be around.
Absolutely, and they can be, and I think generally schools can afford to have a far greater degree of flexibility in terms of their terms and conditions and the level of deposits and such like, which again, if people have been furloughed and businesses have suffered, they might not have the bigger budgets, they might have cash flow problems, and they might need some time, but they want to secure a venue for some activity. Then I think schools actually have greater flexibility with maybe having a smaller deposit, because whilst it's an important and key income stream for schools, the enterprises function, it's not necessarily seen as the core cash flow contributor to schools. And so I think schools, as I say, are in a very advantageous position.
Fantastic. So my final question was going to be about your outlook for commercial income for independent schools, and it certainly sounds to me like you're pretty optimistic and pretty buoyant at this point.
I am, and I genuinely think that schools really need to ensure that that they are looking at this from a commercial perspective. Schools might be audited via the Charities Commission and be registered as a trust, but ultimately they are businesses.
Yes.
And they need to be operated as such. Now, that's not to, as I say, interfere with the integrity of the academic priorities that a school has. But a school is a business. It's a commercial entity. And I think any school that doesn't have a commercially minded people operating within it at a senior level, I think are going to really struggle over the next couple of years. There's talk of potentially upwards of 30% of independent schools going under in the next 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
And which, frankly, of itself provides an extraordinary opportunity for those that flourish. And I think a key ingredient to that is ensuring that they have the commercial skill sets within them to make best use of those opportunities.
Absolutely. And the way I always describe it is the academic excellence that a school provides is the most important. It's the raison d'etre. It's the reason the school exists. But without a really solid business model and people who have that business experience and that business acumen and strategic thinking, that academic excellence is not going to survive to the next generation, because the school needs to compete within a highly challenging environment. And so having that business-like approach is actually underpinning your ability to provide those excellent academic opportunities for your pupils. And so although there may be a tension on a day-to-day basis, the two absolutely go hand in hand, and you cannot have one without the other. A school that tries to just focus on the academics and forget the business side of things will not survive, especially at the moment. But equally, a school that goes all out to be a business and fails to provide a really excellent educational opportunity for its pupils is equally not going to succeed going forward in the market.
That's absolutely right. What I would say as well is, in terms of integrating the enterprise functions, commercial functions of a school into the school's DNA, a crucial component of that is how you communicate that internally. And it's not just talking to the academic staff or house parents or heads of department, senior management team. It's talking about everybody within that community. I know full well that as soon as we get back to Repton, one of the first things I'm doing is getting all of the support staff, the domestics, the chefs, the cleaners, into our theatre to give them a presentation on our enterprise strategy. So they understand what the strategy is, the role that they're going to be playing within it. And so they feel a sense of empowerment as to playing a key role within that, and to give them an opportunity to have a voice.
Yeah, and that internal communications is another form of marketing, basically. So it's not just about providing them with the figures and showing them that the profitability is an underpinning income stream for the school. It's about telling the stories around how this income actually benefits the pupils, how this income contributes towards the activities you're doing with local communities and partnerships with state schools. It's getting the narrative right around why this is critical for the school, not just the bottom line needs it. That will work for some people, but for many people, they need to have a much more human, emotion-driven kind of narrative around why this is important.
Absolutely. And just picking up finally on something that you mentioned earlier about it, getting the balance between being a school and educating young people and the commercial aspects of the business. From my point of view, one of the things that we're looking at doing is providing a percentage of enterprise profit and donating it to the bursary appeal for the Repton Foundation. So actually an organisation that books a conference, somebody that books us for a wedding venue or whatever it might be, whilst it won't be a primary motivator in their decision-making process, it's important for them to know that they are in some way, shape or form contributing to a bursary-funded education for somebody within the community in the years to come. And I think that's an important to create that collaboration between the two areas.
Definitely. And as always in marketing, you're finding the drivers that reinforce the decisions that people are making. And for many people, that will be a really important additional extra, maybe not the core reason they choose the venue, but yeah, will really make them feel comfortable with that decision that they're making a gift which is going to help the bursary fund as well. So thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us today for this conversation. It's really fantastic to hear your optimism, and although these are extremely challenging times for many independent schools, it's fantastic to hear that there are opportunities that you're identifying and pursuing, and that other schools can do the same as well. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So that's it for now, and thanks for listening. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the Independent School Podcast to hear our next episode, or sign up for my regular newsletter at www.consultjuliet.co.uk/sign up. Great, see you next time.